the panelists for this combined panel discussion. Mr. Rajesh Dhuddu, VP Market Development, Wardrobe. Mr. Rajesh Gupta is a partner with KPMG. Mr. Rajesh Ranjan, you already heard him, he moderated the previous panel. He's the VP for BPO Research at Everest Group. Mr. Sumit Priyani is the Vice President Technology at EXL Service. Mr. Jitesh Gera is from Avaya. And Mr. Somin Mukherjee from Pricewaterhouse.
Okay, so we have a wonderful lineup here. We have consultants, KPMG, Everest, and Pricewaterhouse. We have a service provider, EXL Service. We have a technology provider, Avaya. So it's a great composition. And in any case, the topic for the leadership panel was about platform-based BPO, which has got a heavy leaning on technology. So it sort of makes sense to combine the two. So let me begin with Rajesh from Everest. What I want to ask him is, I just overheard a part of the conversation just now, about 3 minutes back. You mentioned that anything that is platform-based or BPaaS, especially in the context of one service provider you mentioned, that's really the favorite in the investor community. How much of it is truth? What are, in your view, what are service providers actually doing in the direction of being platform-based? What does it mean to be really platform-based, and what is the aspirational value of being platform-based?
Sure. I believe I am audible, right? Okay, I'll take it for yes. Essentially, the concept of platform-based BPO, also known as business process as a service, is the ability to offer the entire gamut of delivery from an integrated technology and process and operation perspective on a pay-as-you-go basis. Right? So really removing the capex and making it opex for the client. Right? So it's a pretty compelling construct, especially for those organizations that are struggling to have the right kind of technology in place, and then also looking to kind of increase the value from adding the operation, the BPO part of the equation. So yes, there's a lot of buzz, right? So any of the conversations that I have in the marketplace across the globe, especially when I'm talking to service providers, especially I'm talking to the investment community, one form of the platform, call it platform, call it cloud, call it business process service, essentially it's still a hazy thing along those angle, but the construct remains the same, the shared resources construct. They will talk about it. When I talk to the buy side, however, I see a kind of mixed reaction. Now, why is that? On the service provider side, it's very clear, right? If you can create this kind of model, which is really a one-to-many model, one platform over which you have multiple clients and standardized way of delivering services, you are, on your side, you are lowering your cost of operations. You are de-linking your growth from FTE, direct FTE or dedicated FTE model that has been the model, that has been the traditional model. So it increases your profitability, it increases your ability to kind of scale up. And hence, obviously they won't talk about it. If you're looking for the buy side, and clearly on the investment side, investor community, they are investing in a lot of service providers. SaaS concept, which is purely a technology concept, attracts a high amount of valuation. Some of the recent acquisitions that you would have seen in the SaaS space, fantastic valuation of companies which are actually still making losses. A classic example, recent example is IBM acquiring a company called Connexa, paying $1.3 billion for a company which is still making operating loss. However, the future in that perspective looks great. Now coming directly to the buy side, now I think that one got to understand that it's not going to be a universal phenomenon. I don't believe it's going to be a universal phenomenon. There are 4 factors in my mind that is going to influence the adoption of cloud platform BPaaS. First is the organization's position in the technology curve. If they are already heavily invested in the technology and they made the investment recently, unlikely they are going to let it go and move on to platform. Second is the size of the organization. And kind of linked to the previous point, but the size of the organization is large. Lot many times actually they can get a lot of leverage on the technology side because they scale that already have. If you go to and talk to SAP on the license cost, the kind of license cost that they have for a large organization versus a small organization, because the function of volume is significant. So probably they are not going to get that kind of benefit that a small organization can get because they don't have the economic leverage. In fact, we did this research and found out from a cost saving perspective, especially from a cost saving perspective, the small and mid organization can get 35 to 40% cost savings by moving on to platform, while a large organization can only get somewhere around 7 to 10%, right? Because they already got the economies. So the size of the organization. Third is the degree of change and acceptance of degree of change. Now, BPaaS, a platform, asks you to move to a standardized way of doing things. The extent of customization is pretty limited. You can possibly configure, you cannot customize. So from that angle, an organization needs to be really ready to change, and the degree to which they are willing to change will also influence the adoption of BPaaS. And the last one is in a way kind of linked to the baggage part of it, and I think there was one previous conversation where we had where kind of lack of knowledge itself becomes a consideration. For example, domestic and some of the emerging market, I'm seeing the adoption of BPaaS to be higher than those developed markets where already got the investment. Actually, I mentioned the last point, which is the 5th point, is the function that you are trying to enable, and to what extent that function is central to the organization, and kind of how many linkages that have around that particular function versus what is peripheral, right? So if it is peripheral, it is easier to kind of take something standardized or move on to that. If you take all these things account, it's not going to be easy for a lot of organizations just move to platforms. The next point that I'm trying to say is there's a lot of euphoria, a lot of buzz from the service provider investment side, clearly because there's a solid reason for them. On the buy side, I think it's a very measured and a selective approach that they got to take.
So by virtue of these 5 critical points that you mentioned about adoption, which would determine the adoption of platform as a service, what it seems to me is that the first or the early candidates would be functions like HR or specific parts of HR, or even specific parts of, say, a finance function, which does not have too many linkages, as you said, with the rest of the organizations. If those things are hosted on the platform and delivered on the platform, they would be the first, foremost candidates.
Absolutely. If you look at the data and look at where the BPaaS cloud model in the BPO has really taken flight, it is payroll. Right? It is some part of HR. Now, if you really look at the HR organization, they're always kind of last in the queue on the CIU budget consideration. They're always kind of a neglected child. And now they're getting some of those attention. Again, HR and payroll has some linkages, but most of the HR is kind of not really central to the organization, not like the operations of the organization. And that is the case again. We have seen tremendous adoption and appetite of adoption of BPaaS. So yeah, you're right.
So Rajiv, what I would like to ask you is, KPMG as part of its sourcing advisory looks at sourcing in a more holistic manner. Looks at insourcing first. Looks at selective outsourcing and shared services, and then of course third-party outsourcing. So all of these innovations that BPO vendors that are talking about, what is your take as a person who advises end-user organizations? I mean, how do you separate the chaff out of the grain?
I hope I'm audible. So, a great question to have straight after lunch. There are areas where this will not take off, and as you mentioned, there are large organizations that will have technological investments and they will not get onto this bandwagon. It takes a lot to really have a one-to-many solution. So since 1997, I've been hearing that one-to-many is the answer to all the ills of paid up captive shared services, even one-to-many within the same organization, different verticals, or BPO organizations. I mean, when I started my career back with GE and then with Accenture, this was the buzzword. Scalability is very important as organizations grow 20%, 30%, 50%. You don't add that many FTEs, and that's a big benefit to it. But how much of that has really come from the one-to-many solution is a key question to us. Payroll, classic example, the likes of ADP, Northwest, etc., has worked very well. Others, IT, quite a few things have worked. But other parts of FA, other parts of HR, not to a large extent. And there's a reason for that. While a BPO service provider, quite a few of our clients, they want to get to that, but at the end of it, they have to see where is the market. Within India, and I totally agree with your point, that within India or some of the more developing markets, there's a greater demand. Because there are lots of companies that are of a size that can't afford, forget a large scale ERP, or even a mid scale ERP, this just doesn't make sense for them. And then somebody comes and says, look, we'll give you a chart of accounts in finance. And this is a standard chart of accounts for your trading operations or mining or whatever, security services, small businesses. And here's a segment of the chart of accounts that you can configure. And here's 80% of it that is standard. We'll give you a core HR solution. Here are all the fields you capture for employees. Those people just need to run some of these things. They just need it done. So to them, if you say, okay, we'll just charge you X rupees per invoice on this chart of account, it works. The change management also to that extent is easier because the number of individuals who need to change is far lower. Our point of view of this is that to try and get large organizations or organizational growth curve that they will become very large, it's still a bit optimistic.
So what has been happening at what we heard Mr. Roy talk about his idea about what's the next generation going to be. So as an organization, what are some of the things that you have worked on, and how is it getting received in the market?
Like that, having listened to Rajesh and the fellow Rajesh from KPMG, I have a slightly different point of view. According to me, platform BPO is about 10-15-year-old concept. You gave the example of HR, it was adopted by ADP, it was adopted by Paychecks, and there are a lot of companies in United States who are delivering services HR services using the platform BPO concept. But it got evangelized recently, as recent as 2010. That's because of the newfound interest of the analyst community with the platform BPO. Especially what is happening in the large service provider segment when their revenues are not growing in a non-linear fashion. They are looking at alternates in terms of what they need to do. Industry has gone through various waves of development, lift and shift, and then transformational services. So what next? That's how the platform BPO has become even more evangelized. According to me, platform BPO has equal adoption both in large enterprises as well as in small enterprises. We've looked at some examples in the HR area. For example, if you see from a F&A perspective, take the example of spend management, or take when I talk about spend management, I'm talking about telecom expense management or travel expense management. So you have service providers like Avotus who do telecom expense management, but they're using BPaaS as a delivery model. But on the other hand, if you look at travel expense management, you have people like Concur who use SaaS. They're not doing BPaaS. They'll give you a platform and say, do it yourself. I will not do it for you. So in the large enterprise segment, the adoption of platform-based BPO is at a various continuum. So you have a platform as a service, you have a software as a service, and you have a business process as a service. And there is a reason for this varied mix of development. You know, in large enterprises, basically the fundamental phenomena of platform BPO is it addresses two things according to me for a large enterprise. One is in terms of underserviced needs, and another one is unaddressed needs. So take payroll or take telecom expense management, take travel expense management. They are either underserviced or under-addressed. And moreover, they come in as a tuck-in platforms. You know, you cannot run this platform BPO in a large enterprise wherein it gives shivers to the CIO. You know, and also in the current economic conditions, where the focus is on enhancing the value of investments that have already been made in the IT, the argument for a platform BPO in a large enterprise is a bit counterproductive. So that is what has been happening in large enterprises. So from a Quattro perspective, we have identified this as a space. So what we have done is we have come up with niche services like reconciliations. A lot of large enterprises have a lot of issues with financial reconciliation. So we have a platform which accomplishes reconciliation. We do travel expense management as a BPaaS, while Concur is doing as a SaaS. Of course, we have our own platform, but we also leverage third-party platforms and stuff like that. Now, in terms of, I would like to introduce one more element, that is from a perspective of uncontested. You know, that's where the SMB market comes into the picture. According to me, based on what we have seen in the industry over the last 3-4 years, platform BPO, as Rajesh has said, has a stronger adoption in the SMB segment because there are no there are no historical investments in IT. And in an SMB, in the case of SMB, it's more of a revenue enhancement requirement rather than a cost reduction, as is the case with a large enterprise. So from that perspective, we found that platform-based BPO has a larger, people have a larger affinity for platform BPO in the smaller segment. And it also does well in the smaller segment because, according to me, there are two inherent drivers of a platform BPO. One is in terms of platform multi-tenancy, and the second one is multi-utilization of resources. If you can't achieve platform multi-tenancy, then there's no point of having a platform-based BPO kind of a strategy. And multi-tenancy goes against the grain of the thinking of large enterprises because they are a little bit apprehensive of data security norms and stuff like that. And multi-sharing of resources. You know, today industry talks about multi-shift utilization and multi-seat utilization. Those are the strategies of the past. Whereas the current strategy that we are working on is multi-sharing of resource across the clients. And to put things in perspective, with 3,100 FTEs, one can easily service about 15,000 clients. So on an average, one FTE is catering to multiple clients. That, according to me, brings in the non-linearity in the revenues. So to sum up, you know, it is up to you in terms of what strategy you want to adopt. If you want to adopt platform BPO as a strategy for large enterprises, then it will be only niche opportunities. But if you want to adopt platform BPO as a strategy for SMBs, then you have opportunities all across.
So let us for a moment part the platform BPO side. I would want to talk about technology, basic technology. So when you were mentioning about the dual aspects of technology from the service providers and so what is it that, how do you see the dependence of technology on BPO companies and what is the state of technology overall? So it's kind of a broad canvas, but where do you think BPO companies are in terms of technology?
So platform BPO was a wonderful topic to kick off immediately after lunch, right? And after all this fascinating debate for about last 15 minutes, I was wondering that probably the platform BPO kind of represents today a little bit of a holy grail in the BPO environment. It has been debated for a while, it's been there for a while. We've all known that the animal exists. The animal exists in different shapes and forms, and it's up to us and the BPO providers and up to the willing buyers to taste out how the animal really looks and feels like. But if I were to go back a little bit to the basics, the fundamentals of why this industry exists at all. It's an industry which was formed on the grounds of the science of process management. The ability to deliver a certain sets of processes at a lower economics and from a remote center, that was the original genesis of this industry. So from where we started to where we are now, after almost 15, 20 years of being in this industry, I've actually worked in the BPO industry myself, and now I'm in advisory capacity. I think that we're probably at the third generation in terms of technology adoption. The first generation started with this small workflows, little bit of an AP workflow tool, a TAD workflow tool, little bit of tweaks here and there. You'd pick up a process from the customer, run the process almost as it is, don't do too much of process enhancements, but introduce a couple of workflows which are going to make it a little transparent, a little bit shorter, a little more efficient hopefully. So that was the early generation. From there we moved to the second generation, which was essentially also focusing upon making investments into third-party or external-facing applications. A good example would be an invoice exchange application, an EIPP application in order to cash in the finance domain. And that was where really we got many of the clients excited, because these applications not only enhance your capability of processing a transaction at a lower cost and at a faster time, but they also provide a never seen before opportunity for the external vendor or the external customer to receive an automated solution and do away with the face of the BPO provider as an individual, the Tom, Mary or Rajesh, wherever he or she is, but a tool, a solution which works well and works very effectively. From there where we are now, we're talking of platform BPO or BPaaS as we typically call it. Now, we probably think back a little because all of these technology innovations have essentially been in the client-facing role. And as BPO providers, obviously we need to provide services that the client enables and aids the client. But what about the technology adoption of the BPO companies by themselves with regard to the internal efficiencies, the operating efficiencies, which enables them to be more competitive in the marketplace, drives down their costs, helps improve the SU, helps cut down the bench, helps the 3,100 FTs to serve 15,000 clients. The entire suite of technology adoption for the BPO companies, for the internal efficiencies, probably is very, very nascent right now. In our advisory capacity, working with multitude of clients in the BPO industry, we find typically 2 or 3 genres of clients. Some who are at a very advanced stage of maturity, they realize that this is important. As an example, last week I was advising a client who wants to adopt a single portal for all the employees to enter into drive user experience. It's not just that I need to enter into one portal for leave management, one portal for travel management. It's one user experience, one landing page, but the whole idea was to drive user experience. On the other end of the spectrum, we also find clients who are probably still living. They know that it is important for them. They probably have the funds to invest as well, but their appetite and the inclination to adopt technology as a key differentiator for the better operating efficiencies and hence better differentiation in the competitive marketplace is still very, very weak. And that's the sector that we definitely need to focus upon as advisory industry otherwise.
So, Sunil, at EXL, how do you, Soumya just mentioned about the client-facing or the business-facing part of technology as well as the other part, which is the internal-facing part of technology, which gives you internal efficiencies. So how, at your company, how do you look at these two aspects?
Sure. So I think before I come to efficiencies, I'll probably talk about a little bit of what we are seeing on the customer side at the platform. So I was actually reading an article a few days back, and which had a mention of a survey done, which really stated that about 56 to 60% of the new customers, who are looking at outsourcing, look at getting access to platform as part of those outsourcing deal today. So I think this we have been, BPO over ages as a service provider.
have been looking at bringing in means and ways to reduce costs for customer business processes. But now the technology trends are really shaking out the entire segment and putting the CIOs and the CPOs into the forefront of the entire planning and execution process. So I think IT and is becoming part of the service as well as a platform which the service is being provided. Now coming to the efficiencies element, I think I'll again quote an example. Today morning there was a CEO panel discussion, and there was an example of a customer visiting a hospital. And, they're struggling with the the insurance not being there or something. So I think at EXL we have a platform like which probably we would use as a product or as a service where a customer can really give away the entire management of their platform to us. We will bring in the data into our premises. We'll run the entire life, health, annuity kind of products for them. And so this is on the platform side. Now bringing the efficiencies or the connect points, which probably we heard in the Avaya session today, is like we would have a unified communication or contact center model where a customer can really reach us through the modes of emails, chat, and phone, and that context-based connection is there and the service is there. So that is more on the front side. On the back side, yes, you have to look at methods and means of cloud computing, social media and business analytics tools and other analytics tools to really bring in the overall efficiencies into the service of the BPO environment.
So you have been selling a lot of technology to the customer management sector, customer care sector. First of all, have you been seeing a change in the way they ask for a solution from you? Is it that do they put technology first, or do they put customer experience that they would want to deliver? Which one, does a prospective customer ask for?
I'll start with, audible? So I'll start with gone are the days when the organizations used to select most of mediums of services they are going to provide to the consumers. Now it's more driven by the consumers or the customers. Okay, so let me take a step back. While we are talking about new innovations, new features, or mediums that we are going to introduce for our consumers, for the BPO to be very specific, we need to really think or focus how about the existing infrastructure and the investments that they have made in their BPO, right? And instead of ripping and replacing all of it, how can they provide a consistent customer experience using the same technology? And if more features they are looking at, how could the new technology can wrap over the existing technology and embrace with the new features, which is totally in line with the market demand. So as we all know that the demographics are changing, right? The Gen Y generation is in focus. They prefer to contact the organizations using different mediums like email, SMS, chat, etc. Although by looking at the facts, we understand that voice still owns the major share in the contact center, but today is the day when we cannot afford to ignore the multimedia piece. Now, as they are adapting different mediums, the customer satisfaction risks are also increasing. Why? Because if they are contacting the organization, let's say using email, they would expect the same experience that they have been getting on the voice calls. Right? So that's the reason we need to have a technology today that will provide a consistent user experience, irrespective of the channel that the customer is using to contact the contact center. And that's what the BPOs or organizations are looking at. So to start off with, their discussions are more around customer experience. If you look at the technology, you have a PBX, you have an idea, and other couple of technology components. But if you really see, even if they provide you all the enhanced features, they all are disjointed. When customer is there on the idea, he has the idea experience. When customer is there on the PBX, he has the PBX experience. And when he's contacting through multimedia email, he has a separate standalone experience altogether. So nowadays, organizations are actually looking at a solution that can preserve the context of the customer and provide them a consistent user experience. So yes, user experience is the major priority from the organizations nowadays. Second is, contact centers, to be very specific, they have been taken as a cost center by the organizations. And that's what we are transforming in the industry. We are transforming the contact center from a cost center to a profit center. How? Again, by bringing it, by transforming it into a text center. So let's take an example. For an example, if a customer contacts a contact center, right, using a voice call, next time he sends an email, an agent would have no clue what he called before. Let's say a customer had gone to Facebook and put in, this company, I'm not happy with this company. And he has not mentioned anything else. So what you can do today, you can actually route that particular tweet or post to the agent. Agent can have the complete information of the customer that, okay, 2 days back he bought his cell phone. Then yes, he called in, he was using a voice call. Then he contacted us using an email. And on the Facebook he has written, I'm not happy. So he can actually see the context why customer is not happy. Right? So he can proactively contact the customer and provide him the service what I was looking for. Now coming back to the point when I talk about profit center, then by looking at the history and the context of the customer, the contact center can actually see what this customer's interests are. For example, he has bought the phone. Okay, we have the new accessories would you like to buy. So you can actually do cross-sell and upsell using the same technology. Again, investment that is already there in the BPO, wrapping it over, providing new features, and providing consistent user experience. On top of it, reducing cost and optimizing your agent's efficiency. So these are the primary focus of the BPOs that we are seeing in the market.
So Rajiv, when you're advising clients on sourcing, outsourcing, any form of sourcing, what is it that they ask for and how much of bearing does it actually have on technology possessed by the incumbent service provider?
See, so I didn't catch your name, please. So Jitesh had a very good point about the standardized and enhanced customer experience. I very like your point about the origin of this piece now. So just come to your question in a sec. If you just rewind back, 15 years, whatever, X number of years, somewhere between 10 to 20, BPO is a relatively nascent industry in the scheme of things. We are still doing consulting. Companies are still looking at process optimization, back-end available business process engineering. There's still cost optimization happening. Yes, remote working from India to service international clients started because of the advent of technology. But when I started my consulting career, we would still be tasked with trying to go and save 30% costs at our client. So I started my career with Anderson Consulting. It was headed by a gentleman by the name of Sid Khanna. And when I joined as an analyst, he used to say that if we as consultants can't go in and save 30% anyway, with the focus that we bring and all that, it's just not worth it. So he would kind of go and sell jobs to clients and say, yeah, we will assure you 30% saving. I'll make a very provocative statement. I mean, I've been doing consulting now for the last 17 years. The advent of BPO and the wage arbitrage that goes with it, especially from a Western world, made consulting a bit easy. So what we used to get 30% savings through efficiency without any wage arbitrage, without any BPO, now we are being content doing a business case for a client, which gives you the wage arbitrage, that's usually reasonable, but not thinking about the processes and the technologies that need to go to drive those efficiencies. And that has meant that, and if I take a real life example of a client which outsourced and offshored to my previous company back in 1999, well, offshoring happened in 2003, to India from UK. The next time round, when a challenge came up with that client, and the option was to invest in technology, expensive solution, or to put 2 heads more in India, the choice was to put 2 more heads in India. So actually, the provocative point of view is that BPO in India, especially for multinational companies, has inhibited technology rather than aided it. If that hadn't existed, then we would have been working harder for a 30% savings. On the standardization of the customer experience, again the same client, you would call it a mid-sized client. It was a large travel company in the UK, but £2.5 billion, so whatever, $4 billion there. And it was on an SAP system for its finance, HR, procurement. It acquired in 2005 another company which was £2 billion, so $3.2 billion kind of company, which was on an Oracle system, and they needed to drive synergies out immediately. The platform-based solution would suggest, let's get onto the same ERP, let's get onto the same solution, and so on and so forth. They just didn't have the time for it because of the challenges. And that's when as an organization, what came up is a set of solutions, not social media and so on at that point in time, but a set of solutions that wrap around SAP Logic. The same workflow tool, the same vendor reconciliation tool, the same payroll solution, the same pay slip, the same reconciliation for general ledger, the same collections. Those things wrapped around, which are the kind of the touch points to a customer or a vendor or an employee. And those are definitely areas where a lot of this platform-based thing can work. But the heart of it, and if you look at BPO organization, especially for F&A, HR, IT, supply chain, you look at 100 FTEs doing that work. The number of FTEs doing that sliver, which probably equates to 80 to 90% of communication with the individual sat around it, is still only 10%, 15%, take around that. So, when we speak to our clients from a technology standpoint, we try to almost say, look, the BPO part or the captive shared services and getting all that scalability benefits and all is fine, but look at the actual efficiency. Think of it if this was a standalone process and you didn't have the benefits of that scale, what would you do? And that almost invariably makes you think harder, but invest a bit more in technology. Because there is no consulting we do, there's no advisory we do that does not have a technology enablement to the next stage. So, you can do your PowerPoint slides and you will get paid for the PowerPoint slide, but if you really wanted to earn your living, then there has to be a technology enablement to get to the last mile.
So, do you concur with that?
Completely. I think, as Rajan explained, the entire game has now changed from there being a labor arbitrage and economic advantage to what business benefits and business outcomes you are driving. As a BPO provider, very often you are given a job not by virtue of what price you are quoting and whether it is service from Ludhiana or in Kochi or Delhi, but rather what stakes are you willing to take to say, I am going to reduce your day sales outstanding by X percentage, or I am going to allow you to capture more discounts from your payables vendor than what you are doing today. And for any BPO provider to drive those business outcomes, which has a tangible financial number associated with a P&L, you just cannot do it by providing more people and by doing the same process in the same way or by doing simple BPMs. You need to have a substantial element of technology coming in, substantial element of analytics and business intelligence coming in, significant element of process reengineering also coming in, but all of these need to work hand in hand for the provider to deliver the benefit eventually to the client. And if you do not, there are penalty clauses, and you obviously would not be a very happy person at the end of the contract. So the importance of technology in a BPO solution suite has probably gone up profoundly in the last few years than what it was in the initial days. And that is an appreciation that the industry needs to wake up to in a very major way.
Okay, I have one question I would like to run it to everybody here. What is your one prescription for the BPO? I mean, you are part of the BPO industry yourself, but then still, one thing that the BPO industry should really focus on and do well to be at the forefront of the industry. And it need not be in the technology area.
Yeah, in terms of again, that question can have two contexts. One is in the domestic industry, and another one is in the international BPO space. In the domestic BPO space, also some points that were made in terms of platform adoption is happening on an accelerated fashion in the domestic BPO space compared to the international BPO space, because the fundamentals of domestic BPO are such that there is no labor arbitrage, and we all know that, right? And so, in the absence of labor arbitrage, what is that the service providers are offering to the customers? It is actually the process arbitrage. But that is what they are offering. For example, take the example of collections process. For example, if a telecom company wants to run a collections process, generally the approach is outsource it to some service provider who will run it cheaper, faster than us. Why is that guy is able to run it cheaper and faster, and why the customer is not able to run it cheaper and faster? Because that guy, the service provider, has kind of reinvented the price performance and maybe the product equation And then he's bringing an element of process arbitrage. That's what I call it as a process arbitrage. So in the domestic industry, the key is to build on that process arbitrage. And that, I think, will happen through platforms. And also the context of Indian businesses are such that there are not many optimal investments in the technology in Indian businesses, even if you take a large enterprise or a small enterprise. So from that perspective, the adoption for a platform-based BPO is very high in the domestic space. So one advice is for the service providers to capitalize that particular opportunity and start building on that, because it will only reiterate their process related value proposition to the clients. Now moving to the international market, if you see the international businesses and if you see the world economy, 97% of the economy is driven by small and medium businesses. And it's only the 3% of the economy which is driven by the large enterprises. So in the large enterprises, unfortunately, the approach has been use my technology and then do lift and shift, which we call as your mess for less. So that has been the value proposition. And from that kind of a value proposition, service providers have made a significant progress in terms of bringing in transformational aspects, wherein they're talking about, we've seen it happening in telecom, wherein they said, hey, I look at your total cost of ownership. Forget about the individual constituents of the total cost of ownership, but I look at it and stuff like that. Those are good positive developments in the large enterprise space. But in the small and the medium business space, that's where I think there's plenty of opportunity. There you go to the person says, for example, take F&A. The person says, I don't have a CFO. I run my F&A maybe on Excel or maybe on QuickBooks. How can you help me? There you have an opportunity to play a role of a business enhancement partner rather than business process management partner. So you see the difference in terms of there's an opportunity to combine technology, consulting and process expertise in one package and give it to that small and medium enterprise, and by virtue of that, the guy is only able to grow faster and is able to survive longer. So that's where there is a tremendous opportunity to play, and if you couple that with a remote delivery, be it on-site or offshore, I think that's a great strategy to have.
I quite agree with Rajesh, and quite like the structures where, if you think of it, BPO servicing domestic clients in India, BPO servicing international clients. Domestic is a good buzzword that's come up in the last half a decade. I myself tried to focus on it for a while. All the research we've done suggests that the domestic market, for whatever reasons, no wage arbitrage, sizes and so on, is a very, very small component of all the business done in this room. And it's going to even grow, and it's not like it's a small component that's just going to outgrow the international market anyway. So, how you focus your efforts on the domestic versus international needs to be calibrated and in that context. But the real big prize for all of us in this room is the international market from a BPO standpoint. When you look at the international market, F&A, HR, IT, the three key components of BPO or ITO for that matter, is part of an SG&A cost. The SG&A cost is 2.5–3% of the overall base that it might be a couple of percentage points here or there. F&A, median company will be anywhere between 0.8 to 1.2%, IT might be 1.5%, HR might be 2.2%. It's that kind of thing. Now, out there you save 30%, 40%, 50%. You get a 1%, 1.5% savings. Imagine a largish or a mid-sized organization going through all that pain to get that 1–1.5% and moving 100 people, 200 people, 500 people worth of work, X thousand miles away. It is a difficult journey. The companies that had to jump on the bandwagon largely have. There will be still several more for our careers, our lifetimes, but it's not a bottomless pit. The bottomless pit is, as Shumrin was saying, the value add that we do. To take a real example, a logistics client, one of the largest logistics companies in the world, they outsourced 700 FTEs worth of work to India. And they saved some money, and the CEO came to India and so on, and then he said, okay, why is collections not here? And the point was, collections is all maintained by all the warehouse heads and the sales guys and so on, because they don't want people in India speaking to the customers. Bit of politics around that. Finally, it so happened that 80 FTEs worth of collections work was moved to India. The wage arbitrage was whatever it was. The efficiencies, process efficiency was whatever it was. The DSO of this company was 76 days. In 2 years, the DSO was 19 days. The turnover of this company was $20 billion. So you can do the math. 76 days to 19 days on $20 billion of turnover. I mean, yeah. Versus any savings you get from wage arbitrage, this client will never move from this outsourcing provider, whatever you do, from cutting your costs. So how you bring back, how each of us brings that value, how each of us actually solves a solution, solves a problem for a client and gives a solution, is far more important than heads at a cost. I think we will survive our careers, maybe, for a few more years, but it's not. If any of the younger guys you are recruiting right now, I don't think they will make it to CX or level position or VP level positions in the business.
I think a slightly old-fashioned view of this one prescription that we have. Heads, FTs, numbers, these are the realities of life for all of us. Ultimately, the BPO industry, whatsoever needs level of adoption of technology, it still needs to be a people-intensive industry to a large extent, at least in our generation. I can't say career, but at least in our generation. So if the industry is going to be so much of heads-oriented, are we exploiting those heads enough other than making them to work on a certain platform? Is a question to ponder about. And I'm not talking of employee experience, I'm not talking of whether the processes are being done effectively or not. I think the BPO industry is staring at an untapped opportunity of crowdsourcing and collaboration within its employees than what it is leveraged enough. I know one of the largest BPO providers in India who launched a platform called Solution Exchange, wherein they registered their support of SMEs outside the company to advise them on some of the client issues. Great initiative. But how many BPO organizations have actually invested in an internal solution exchange coefficient or a platform? How much of energy and money and time is being invested to tap into your own employees, not just to run an idea generation workshop, one of its kind, but really to do a crowdsourcing within and collaboration within your organization to drive business outcomes and business solutions? If there is one prescription, I'd probably say look at your employees, not just as heads, but as minds and hearts as well.
All great points, and it makes it difficult for me to come out with new points. We'll still try. Rajiv was kind of talking about the SG&A as a percentage of revenue, 3% here and there. The other part which we are actually missing out is the actual operations cost, the industry-specific functions, which is the majority cost in any organization. Clearly, there is a huge amount of opportunity to address, and that is where I see the industry moving. When we talk about insurance, we talk about capital marketing, we talk about retail, we are moving beyond these HR, F&A, IT, all those things are still need to be done. But look at the kind of, so here you get 30% saving on 3%, this is what you get. And here, if it is like 30% or 40% revenue and you get 10% saving, we're talking about the quantum of change that is going to be really, really significant. And there are the CEOs to all the CXOs who sit and take notice. But easier said than done, right? I'm not, the entire operations are going to go down 10 outsource. But even if you kind of scale it down, there's still enough opportunity for the BPO service provider to kind of address industry-specific functions. Right? That's one point. The second point is, I think we talked about a lot of technology and platform, but let's not confuse this thing. From a BPO perspective, more often than not, the sale is going to happen within the business function of the client organization. Now, if you are putting your platform ahead of your value proposition, then you are actually, in a way, shooting your foot. Simply because it's a technology or platform decision. No, CI would have taken that. They have already taken a technology. If someone is talking about BPO or services, technology needs to be an enabler. It has to be the back part of it, which is going to help organization realize the business value. So the way you position it, so there's a lot of talk around platform, all this, you need to be cautious in terms of how you position it within the client set, and the impact of that in terms of getting that business and ultimately delivering value. So these are 2 points that I will share.
Thank you. So I think just to add to this, and very little bit contradict. I think technology from a neighborhood is probably becoming a differentiator, and that's what my view. And probably I would say that if I have to describe in one statement, probably the modernization of business processes through the means of virtualization of business processes and externalization is probably the way to go. So I think when I talk about modernization, we're talking about platform, products, technologies to enable this. But ultimately, when I say virtualization, what we are saying is instead of whatever is being done today by the manpower or the human resources is probably done by platform. And we actually reduce the number of hands working upon it. And externalization is probably we move away from the center of the flow into the data center or maybe to the cloud and probably run that as a service. So I think that is what my view is.
I totally agree with Rajesh. So, technology is definitely there, and that's the one which we are able to provide the services. But let's keep it in the back and show the business value to the end client. And I would like to focus on the analytics piece in the contact center or in the organization. Because in around 2005, 2000, in fact, at the starting of 2000, right, it was more of a voice-only services that we used to provide to our end customers, right? And we used to get business. I won't say very easily, but yes, without any extraordinary effort. But right now, today is the day when we cannot just take the business based on providing the traditional voice or the traditional equipment or the services. Although, in the backend, QT technology, that's getting transformed, that is always a step ahead. But today is the time when we should bring analytics in the organization, which will not only tell you what is happening in the contact center or the organization, rather it will also tell you why is it happening, what actions you should take to take care of those challenges and bring more business. And that's where the application, today is the day of the applications and not just the traditional telephony or the programs. So my suggestion is just focus on the application that you can provide to your clients and bring the analytics to the organizations. That's it.
In terms of, you had asked about the future opportunities and the related aspects. According to me, the platform-based BPO may not be just confined to the construct of a business to business. There are a lot of opportunities that are coming up in the context of business to consumer as well. If you take the technical support service providers, like since we have an offering, I will name our company first and the competition later. So in terms of QResolve and IoT, what these guys are doing on the strength of a platform and then penetrating into the B2C segment. And similarly, we've seen that happening to a large extent in the international and in the domestic context as well, especially the travel providers. Take the example of Travelocity or Expedia or Make My Trip. There was a platform, and they were managing the travel itineraries of individuals. So there is a very strong business opportunity sitting in that model, which also got validated by the likes of Tutor Vista and stuff like that. So my submission is, in terms of when one is looking at opportunities, it need not be just in the context of business to business. There's a lot of opportunities in business to customer as well.
Okay, so that is a wonderful set of points. Let me just summarize this. It's actually an intense delight to have 6 clear set of points which I could possibly farm out to my editorial team Each of them would merit an individual story. Maybe I can see them smiling there. Okay, so first one is the potential to serve small and medium businesses, as well as the potential to serve a domestic market like India. Platforms enable that. Platforms would also enable you to serve, in a business to consumer mode. Delivering business outcomes that matter. If a BPO service provider is able to do that, then there is no question of losing clients. You can keep on gaining clients as long as you are able to, really give unquestionable and indisputed value.